So President Biden has announced a new $300 million weapons package for Ukraine. According to U.S. officials, the package will include artillery shells and ammunition, anti-armor weapons, anti-aircraft missiles, and spare parts. Defense officials say this is a one-time arrangement made possible through savings in long-term contracts with weapons makers. With foreign aid funding stalled on the Hill, the Biden administration working to find creative ways to help Ukraine as the country faces dire weapons shortages in its fight against Russia.
Let's turn back to politics here at home. The general election rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump is essentially official this morning. That's because NBC News is projecting both men now have enough delegates to win their respective parties' nominations following their latest primary wins. Last night, President Biden was projected to become the presumptive Democratic nominee after a win in the Georgia Democratic primary. Just hours later, Donald Trump was projected to secure his spot as the presumptive Republican presidential nominee after winning the Republican primary in Washington state. After last night's wins, President Biden issued a long statement arguing the threat Trump poses is greater than ever. In his words, he wrote, "Donald Trump is running a campaign of resentment, revenge, and retribution that threatens the very idea of America." Voters now have a choice to make about the future of this country. Are we going to stand up and defend our democracy or let others tear it down? Will we restore the right to choose and protect our freedoms or let extremists take them away? The president continued, "I believe the American people will choose to keep us moving into the future. With every crisis, America has always emerged stronger and more united on the other side. This November will be no different, and I believe we will do it together." Meanwhile, in a nearly 4-minute video posted to social media, former President Trump celebrated last night's results and, of course, went after Joe Biden.
This was a great day of victory. Last week was something very special, Super Tuesday. But now we have to get back to work because we have the worst president in the history of our country. His name is Joe Biden, sometimes referred to as Crooked Joe Biden, and he must be defeated.
NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki is looking at how things might play out for the Biden and Trump campaigns between now and November. Steve?
The rematch is on. It's Trump-Biden Part 2. So let's take our first look at the road to 270. What does the playing field look like at the outset of this campaign? So this is how we ended up in 2020. The Trump states in red, obviously the Biden states in blue. It all added up to 306 electoral votes for Joe Biden and the presidency. And the first thing to know looking at this is that math would be different even if Biden won all the same states he won, and even if Trump won all the same states he won. Why? Because we had the census and we had reapportionment since 2020, and that changes the number of electoral votes in some states. So if you apply the new electoral vote totals from the census, that same combination of states now only gives Biden 303, Trump 235, a net gain of 3 electoral votes in the Trump states just because of the census and reapportionment. So that's the starting point based on 2020. And then the question is, okay, what's the battleground here? And the obvious battleground would be the 5 states that Donald Trump carried in 2016, but then Joe Biden flipped and won in 2020. That's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona. Those 5 states. So if the Trump campaign obviously wants to be on offense in these states, needs to flip these states. How many? Well, the math can vary a little bit here, but let's go through the simplest path, at least mathematically, from the Trump standpoint. It would be to take the closest of these 5 states. And the 2 that were the closest were Georgia, margin in 2020 about 12,000 votes. Arizona, 10,000 vote or so margin. So if, big if here, but just showing you the math, if Trump were able to win Georgia, 251. If he added Arizona to that, 262. Still not enough, even with those 2 states, to hit 270. Meaning, if he wins back the 2 closest that he lost in 20, Trump still needs to add one of these 3, a Wisconsin, a Michigan, a Pennsylvania. Which was the closest in 2020? By a margin of just over 20,000 votes, it was Wisconsin. So you could see if Wisconsin were to join those other 2, Trump would just clear 270, and that would then be enough if he didn't lose any other states that he won, and that's the other big question here. Are there any states on this map? We're going to find out in the next few months that these campaigns can succeed putting in play that we don't think of as being in play right now. The one the Democrats would like to put in play, we'll see if they can, is North Carolina. North Carolina's a pretty big state, 16 electoral votes. Margin had come down for Trump, won it both times, but his margin was reduced in 2020. Poll this week put Trump up 5 points in North Carolina. A lot of people think it's a pipe dream for Democrats to win it this year, but they're certainly going to try. And if they were to succeed, just showing you again here, look what that does to the Electoral College math. Now you'd have Trump winning back 2 states here in the Sun Belt and a Midwestern state, but not having Carolina. Biden would still win in the Electoral College there. Again, that would be flipping a Trump state. So we'll see if the Democrats can succeed in doing that. We'll see if the Republicans can succeed in doing it anywhere. It's only our first look, and there are many more to come.
All right, Steve Kornacki, thanks very much as always. So Jonathan Martin, there's no mystery here, right? I mean, this is Michigan, this is Wisconsin, this is Pennsylvania. We know,
we've seen the movie.
Georgia, they're going to be fighting. It looks like it's trending a little Trump's way, but there'll be a fight. Biden won last time. But we know where this race is going to be decided, and we've got an 8-month road to get there.
Strap in. Yeah, exactly. It's predictable where it's going to be fought. What's less predictable, obviously, are sort of the contours of the race. But look, I think Arizona and Georgia were probably the biggest surprises for Biden 4 years ago. Yeah. I think it's going to be tough for him to hold on this time around in both states. Pennsylvania, of the 3 Great Lakes states, probably the best one for Biden right now. Michigan and Wisconsin a bit tougher. But I think that's where the action is mostly, are those 3 Great Lakes states. Biden holds on there and he wins. He loses those 3 states, or any one of them, and Trump probably wins. I don't think it's more complicated than that, Willie.
Yeah, there's not much of a path for the president otherwise, and certainly a reflection of a campaign's priorities is the candidate's time. Exactly. And he was in Pennsylvania over the weekend. He's visited Pennsylvania by far more than any other state.
A few times, yeah.
Other than Delaware, of course. And he heads to Wisconsin and Michigan today, a two-day swing. Looking at, and Steve did a good job laying out the map there. There is one state though Democrats think they can flip. They acknowledge Arizona's going to be harder this time. Georgia's going to be harder. Some worries about Nevada too.
Yeah.
North Carolina, though.
Yeah.
North Carolina, a state where abortion rights are going to be on the ballot, and now the Republicans have also nominated a conspiracy theorist and a Holocaust denier for governor.
Yeah, so much of this is just pure demography, right? You tell me the demographics of a certain state, a certain zip code even, I can probably tell you who's going to win. And that gets to the heart of that split between Nevada and North Carolina. Nevada, much more working class, dramatically fewer college-educated voters in Nevada. There's not a big kind of upscale suburb in Las Vegas. Very different in North Carolina because you have 2 population centers in Charlotte and Raleigh with a ton of college-educated voters who historically were kind of Bush Republicans who are now up for grabs. And I think that's why the Biden folks feel a little better about North Carolina and a little more concerned about Nevada.
So Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, certainly Detroit. What's going on with the Democrats and the black vote?
I think it's more of a gender issue than it is a racial issue. I think Democrats have a profound challenge with men of all races, and especially working class men. And it's not just working class white men. I think they have a problem with working class African Americans and Hispanics. And
Why?
I think part of it is just pure cultural politics. Men tend to be more instinctually conservative, regardless of race. And they see a sort of Democratic Party that culture has drifted left, and they're more gettable because of that. But let's be clear, this is a margins game. This is not a sort of a huge, but margins matter in this election. And if 5% of black men in Milwaukee or Detroit stay home or vote for RFK Jr., that's a profound threat to Biden.
And RFK Jr. now potentially with Aaron Rodgers as his running mate.
Yes, we're going to talk
Wisconsin
more about that.
Up for grabs.
We're going to talk more about that. Yes, Aaron Rodgers on the short list to be vice president. An active NFL player, by the way.
I'll believe when I see it.
F. Kennedy.
Only the Jets.
Something interesting in Georgia last night. We said it might be trending a little bit Trump's way. There was a poll that had them within the margin of error. It would be close.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to watch last night, particularly what you're talking about. These college-educated Republicans, a lot of them still went for Nikki Haley last night. I mean, she stole about 70,000 protest votes. Donald Trump won by, we all know the number, just under 12,000 last time. That'll be an interesting group to watch.
They're trying to force feed the pill to the dog, and the dog won't take the pill, Will. And it's like, guys, the primary is over. She's dropped out of the race. They still won't take the damn pill, right? And I think that gets to the heart of Trump's challenge, is that places like Cobb County, which, were once the beating heart of the realignment in the 70s and 80s from Democrats to the GOP, have now flipped back. This is neutral district. And they simply don't want to vote for the Trump version of the GOP. Not sure that they're sold yet on Biden, but they're still gettable, no question about it.
Yeah, and finally, the one other aspect that we can talk about later is how his legal cases impact the election moving ahead now that it's started in earnest. The judge in the E. Jean Carroll case approved like $91 million that Trump put down for his appeal. Did he defame her again? Will there be another civil defamation trial? And also, he should be in court in 2 weeks for the porn star hush money case. And I believe if his delay effort doesn't work, Donald Trump has to be in court for that, hearing all the details of the case against him coming out. It'll be interesting to see how that plays into all of this. And
But the Republican National Committee, for example, now completely taken over by Donald Trump and his campaign, now reshaping its leadership with a lawyer who was at the forefront of all the lies about the 2020 election. Former Trump attorney and One America News Network reporter Christina Bobb has been hired as the RNC's, ready for this, senior counsel for election integrity. Bobb pushed conspiracy theories about the 2020 election, publicly urged then Vice President Mike Pence against certifying the election results on January 6th. She even authored a book titled Stealing Your Vote, the inside story of the 2020 election and what it means for 2024. Bobb, also known for playing a key role in Trump's classified documents case, telling the Department of Justice she had no knowledge about government documents at Mar-a-Lago. The FBI, of course, found a trove of materials there 2 months later. She has not been charged with any crimes. In a statement about her new role, Bobb said, quote, "I'm honored to join the RNC and thrilled the new leadership is focused on election integrity. I look forward to working to secure our elections and restore confidence in the process." So, Jonathan Lemire, you wrote an entire book about this called The Big Lie. Christina Bobb, not a passive participant. She, for example, was in that Trump command center at the Willard Hotel on the eve of January 6th, cooking up this plan with Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon and everybody else to effectively plot a coup against the United States government and compel Mike Pence to not certify the election.
I mean, you just ticked through her role with the classified documents case, but absolutely, she was a big part of the effort to try to overturn the 2020 election. She was a key member of the effort, the fake elector scheme, which is what they thought they could do on January 6th with if Vice President Pence, then Vice President Pence, had gone on with it. And in her time at OAN, she herself has been sued by Dominion.
Yes.
She herself, some of her stories on air segments have been referenced by Smartmatic in their ongoing litigation as well. I mean, she is one of the, fundamental characters in the plot to overturn the 2020 election, just like House Speaker Mike Johnson. And now, with all those qualifications on her resume, she's going to be Trump's lawyer, head of the RNC, to play this role here. For Trump, it's about looking the part. It's about perfect central casting. We know that, and it's about loyalty. And she has time and time again proven her loyalty to Trump by willing to spout the big lie.
Mike, utter shamelessness. In fact, this is almost trolling to have Christina Bobb, one of the central figures of the conspiracies about the 2020 election, named Officer of Election Integrity at the RNC, which, by the way, is now run by Donald Trump's daughter-in-law.
It's a perfect fit, though. A perfect fit for the times that they have created, that Donald Trump has created. And Claire McCaskill, I don't know about you, but I'm getting increasingly weary of people who scratch their heads and say, how did we get here? We know how we got here. We have one man who for at least 16, perhaps 20 years, has been out there on the public stump, increasingly getting more publicity and more publicity, preaching a combination of anger, fear, and lies, a toxic combination that inflames the culture around him. And he has done it successfully. And it's no wonder that every poll that's ever taken asking if the country is on a right track or a wrong track always wins because of the poison that he has injected into the political culture and into the social culture of this country. So my question to you is, are you surprised that we are where we are?
Well, I think I'm surprised that so many people are ignoring what's as plain as the nose on their face. I think I'm surprised that grievance is this powerful. I mean, here's what he is. He is a marketer of grievance with bold lies on a repetitive loop. And that combination has proven to be very politically powerful. Very disappointing that someone who lies in the name of grievance is as successful as he has been. But his failures in so many other ways are what drag him down. And one of those are the people he surrounds himself with. I think everybody needs to remember that the majority of his cabinet has rejected his candidacy this time. The majority, he said, I'm going to surround myself with really good people. He did to some extent, and most of them now are saying don't ever vote for Donald Trump. So what he surrounds himself with reflects on him. That's why he couldn't get things done in the presidency. And that's why he puts a really bad lawyer in at the DNC. I mean, this is a woman who did some really bad lawyering for him. Saying nothing of the fact that she swallowed whole a ridiculous lie and tried to perpetrate power in the face of a free and fair election. So, this guy doesn't surprise me anymore. In fact, what I'm most worried about is we've become numb to how outrageous it is.
Yes, again, to the point that we were talking just yesterday about John Kelly talking about Donald Trump's affinity, obsession, wanting to be like, wanting to emulate Adolf Hitler.
Mr. Ambassador, great to have you at the table with us.
Great to be here.
Under different circumstances than we used to talk to you.
This is different.
It is, right? We're not going to ask you about any tweets or anything
that's great.
from leaders of your party. So let's talk about what's happening on the ground. You have sort of a front row seat to it. Serving inside of a NATO country, and what's going on in the place where you used to serve, which is this holdup of the aid to Ukraine. Right. What are the consequences of that? How is that being felt?
Well, first, as Mika said, Turkey's been great in terms of supporting Ukrainian sovereignty. They've supplied drones that have been very effective there, and they invoked the Montreux Convention to keep Russian warships out of the Black Sea. That's been extremely important in the war. But from that seat, it's important to get this aid for Ukraine. They're running out, and they need the help. And I can tell you, if you want our NATO allies in the region to step up, then we have to remain committed, and that's why it's so important.
One of the good things about having you as ambassador, I'm sure was some of the thinking of President Biden, is that you still know a whole bunch of people inside the Congress. Have you been able to prevail upon any of your old colleagues about how crucial this is?
Well, I've often said that, regimes may change in the world, but geography doesn't. And Turkey is always going to be important. And that's why when Sweden was able to get into NATO, Turkey was one of the holdouts there. They had some issues that they had to get resolved, and they did. But then Congress came through with a $23 billion F-16 sale right away to Turkey, which is important to keep Turkey interoperable. They have the largest army outside of us in NATO and the largest air force. And so it's important. Those kind of relationships are important. And I was happy that my former colleagues saw it.
On this direct aid to Ukraine, though, are you able to make the case to any of them?
I'm making that case, and I'm confident that they will come through with it. They understand the importance of keeping with our commitment and the fact that if we want, as I said, our NATO regional partners to step up, we have to remain committed.
But let's speak to how we got here, how the Republican Party got here. We just played that ad that Lieutenant Colonel Vindman brought us using Ronald Reagan's words. This was certainly, Republicans would be at the forefront of national security and certainly the forefront to standing up against Russia. What does it look like? How do you feel about how that's deteriorated?
Well, the best thing about being an ambassador is being 6,000 miles away from politics and not having to engage in partisan politics. But it is different. Even when I was there, you'd seen the trend. We Republicans have traditionally been the party of Reagan, of strong national defense. I think there are many who still retain that creed, but it's been tough to see. But I'm confident, like I said, that we'll come through. This is a bipartisan issue. On the issues that I deal with Turkey, And that part of NATO, it's been completely bipartisan when I go back to the Hill and ask for this or that.
You know, Ambassador, you mentioned geography a couple of minutes ago, and if you're standing in Istanbul, you can look across and you can see Asia.
Yeah.
So the geography of Turkey is critical in global affairs, especially now, perhaps more than ever. How dicey is it, or navigating the relationship with the United States, Turkey, and Erdogan and Putin? That's a pretty complex relationship, Putin, Erdogan, and the ambassador to to Turkey. How do you do it? What are the problems, if there are any?
Oh, you mentioned the proximity. I actually swam from Asia to Europe. There's a swim that they do every year that you swim across the Bosphorus and you swim between the continents. That's how close it is. And Turkey occupies that position. It allowed them to invoke the Montreux Convention. Like I said, they control the Turkish Straits. That's important. They've been an important interlocutor in terms of negotiating the grain deal initially for Ukraine to be able to get grain out of the Black Sea, and prisoner exchanges. On sanctions, as mentioned, they don't employ the same sanctions that we do. They say we have relationships economically with Russia that we have to depend on, particularly in the energy sector. Having said that, Turkey's committed not to allow Russia to circumvent sanctions through Turkey. And so we're working with them collaboratively on that issue. But it's extremely important. Those relationships have to be strong. And sometimes it's a challenging relationship because of Turkey's cultural, historical relationships, economic relationships with Russia. But like I said, they remain committed to Ukraine's sovereignty. And they've challenged the Russians in a number of areas, not just in Ukraine. So it's a productive relationship.
On another front, Ambassador, the Israel-Gaza war, I don't think a lot of people appreciate Turkey's role or its potential role in resolving this in some way. President Erdogan has been very critical of Israel, obviously has called for a ceasefire. What can he do to help bring some kind of a lasting solution? That's
a great point. There again, you have war to the north in Ukraine, war to the south in Gaza, and Turkey sits right in the middle. As a 97% Muslim country, obviously there are deep feelings of affinity with the Palestinians, and so they're very critical of what Israel has done in terms of going into Gaza. Having said that, they haven't cut ties with Israel, and they have expressed a willingness to act as a guarantor, the day after, and to work with their other regional partners for a lasting peace. They're very supportive of the two-state solution, as we are. So I think we'll be working. I mean, it's tough to see any long-term durable solution in Gaza without regional powers like Turkey playing a role.
Yeah, you're right in the middle of a lot going on in this world. I know you don't want to talk politics, and I respect that, but just generally speaking, if you're talking to some of your former colleagues, how is life on the outside?
There is life after the Senate. No, it's great. I mean, despite the dysfunction you see sometimes, there are good people there on both sides of the aisle trying to do the right thing. And I think they'll come through on Ukraine and on a number of these issues. So
let's hope so. U.S. Ambassador, Senator Jeff Flake, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Always good to see you.
Yeah.
Still.
25 years ago today, this very day, Poland joined NATO, and some of you may remember I was very involved in that happening. And during that ceremony, the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, made this following statement. She said, "When we stand together, no force on earth is more powerful. We stand together, no force on earth is more powerful." I believe that then, and I believe it now. And we see it in Polish-American troops serving side by side in NATO on the eastern flank, including in Poland. And we see it in our commitment to strengthen NATO's collective defenses. And I want to pause here and note that Poland is spending nearly 4% of its gross domestic product on defense, much of it purchasing American weapon systems and aircraft. And has double the NATO commitment, 4%.
That's President Biden at the White House yesterday welcoming Poland's prime minister and president yesterday. President Biden praised Poland for its commitment to NATO, noting the country's proportionally spends more on its military than any other member of that alliance. Joining us now is United States Ambassador to Poland, Mark Brzezinski. He was at yesterday's meeting between President Biden and the Polish leaders. Ambassador, it's great to have you back with us this morning. Prime Minister Tusk came out of that meeting yesterday with a pretty direct and pointed message to Speaker Mike Johnson about aid to Ukraine that's being held up in the House. He said, in part, this is not some political skirmish that matters only on the American political scene. Mr. Johnson's failure to make a positive decision will cost thousands of lives. He takes personal responsibility for that. Ambassador, have you and other Polish leaders who are on the front lines, of course, of this conflict have been able to apply any pressure to members of Congress to prevail upon them how critical this issue is right now?
Willie, thank you for having me. Something remarkable happened yesterday. A Polish president and a Polish prime minister, who themselves are on opposite sides of the political spectrum, traveled together to Washington to stand in solidarity with the American president and to convey to Congress, we need to get the security funding for Ukraine passed now. This is an existential threat. Putin will not stop in Ukraine. And the Poles wanted to convey the message that we have done all you asked. We have conveyed weapons to the Ukrainians. We have taken in to Poland millions of Ukrainian refugees. We cannot leave now the Ukrainians standing on their own and allow them to lose. There is too much at risk in terms of European democracy and European security. And so that was the message to Congress. I also visited the Hill this past week, and what I saw on both the Democratic and Republican side is a lot of interest in getting this passed, and I'm hoping that this happens.
Mr. Ambassador, Prime Minister Tusk certainly delivered that message yesterday, and whether it's going to be receptive to the Republicans, we're going to find out in the near future. But in Warsaw, you were on the ground, basically in a war zone. And my question to you is, do you get any sense of increasing feelings of trepidation from countries that abut the Soviet Union, that abut Poland, in fear of Russia's appetite for war, appetite for territory? Do you get any sense of a growing fear of that?
Mike, in Poland, support for Ukraine is high, but there is dropping optimism in Poland that the Ukrainians will win because of the lack of funding coming from the West. And, you know, the Poles have thrown everything at this because they are right next door. For the Poles, Mike, this is 1939. This is the invasion of Central Europe by a horrible, vicious foreign attacker, in this case, Russia attacking Ukraine. The video coming out of Ukraine is reminiscent of World War II. And so the Poles ask, what do the words never again mean, if not this? If we do not stand with the Ukrainian people when they are being terrorized and pulverized, when we said that we would never allow this to happen again. So there is a sense that this is a moment, a proving moment in terms of the way the West and particularly America is viewed. Are you people of your word, and are you going to stand with the Ukrainians? Because what is at stake is freedom and democracy in Europe.
So, Mr. Ambassador, Poland there, next door to Ukraine, certainly in the initial months of this war became a welcoming home for so many refugees. Give us an update, if you will, about refugees there. Are some, they're still coming? And if indeed the situation deteriorates further in Ukraine, if that USA does not get to Kyiv, what will that mean for Poland and its neighbors in terms of refugees, but also their economies?
Well, you know, it's a very interesting question. Ukraine is a country of 45 million people. Poland is about 38 million people. Poland's population has increased by 1 million people as this crisis has unfolded because of the number of Ukrainians coming to Poland and being placed into people's homes and apartments. You know, the border between Poland and Ukraine is 380 miles long. There are 8 border crossings, and when the crisis broke out, we had a scientific understanding of those 8 border crossings to be able to help the influx of Ukrainian people into Poland. What we did not expect were the lines of Poles driving to the border to pick up Ukrainians to take them to their homes. The Ukrainians literally ran into the arms of angels, of Poles organizing on social media, organizing to go at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. to pick up the Adamyuk family at the Medyka border crossing near Rzeszów to take them to Bydgoszcz or Poznan, Poland. It was that much of a reactive mobilization of the Polish people. And they did that because the Poles feel safe and secure, because they are members of NATO. But it was remarkable what happened yesterday in the sense that you had two Polish leaders come to Washington, a little bit like before the beginning of World War II, to say to Western leaders, there is something horrifically terrible about to happen here, and we need you to be people of your word. And they stood with the American president, Joe Biden, and conveyed that to Congress.
And history will remember well Poland's role in welcoming those refugees from Ukraine in their hour of need. Claire McCaskill, we spoke in our last hour to your former Senate colleague, now the ambassador to Turkey, Jeff Flake. He said, talking to some of his former colleagues and people on Capitol Hill, he was optimistic that the House eventually would get this aid to Ukraine. Unclear why it's taken this long or what's going to change to make them to do that. Not everyone shares his optimism.
Well, let's not be confused here. There's only one person who is stopping the aid to Ukraine, and that is Donald Trump and his sycophants in Congress that are following his lead. And of course, we all know his allegiance to Putin and what Putin represents, which is not the cause of freedom. Ambassador, my question to you, the former president has done a lot of damage in confusing people about NATO. And this idea that there are somehow dues and that somehow people aren't paying their fair share. Can you speak to that and how frustrating that is for all of our NATO allies, that misrepresentation of what NATO is and how it operates has taken root in the United States?
Sure. Well, I can simply report, Claire, from Poland and say that the Poles this year will spend more on U.S. defense products than Saudi Arabia. And Poland doesn't have oil and gas. That is how important the defense build-out is because of Putin. Listen to Putin's words this morning, invoking nuclear weapons, a nuclear power, invoking the president, invoking nuclear weapons. The president of Russia did that this morning. How unbelievably irresponsible. And of course is the reason why Poland and others are building out. Poland will spend more than 4% of its GDP on defense products, exceeding the 2% requirement by NATO by double. And you see many other European nations catching up. Look, I always say in Poland, Polska jest bezpieczna I Polska jest zabezpieczona, which any Polish American listening right now will know Poland is safe and Poland is secure. For the first time in the 200-year history of the American-Polish relationship, we can say that because Poland is a member of NATO. And the Polish leaders came to the White House yesterday to say to Joe Biden, thank you, President Biden, because when you were a senator in the late 1990s, you worked with then Republican Senator, Chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Jesse Helms. So a Democrat, Joe Biden, working with Republican Jesse Helms to put aside political differences and to advance the strategic interests of the United States of a Europe safe and secure.
It was a remarkable scene at the White House yesterday. United States Ambassador to Poland, Mark Brzezinski. Mark, thank you always for your time. And Mika says hello.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you. Hi, Mika.
To Washington, a group of House Democrats has formed a new task force focused on border security. Joining us now, co-chairs of the Democrats for Border Security Task Force, Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas and Congressman Tom Suozzi of New York. Gentlemen, good morning to you both. Congressman Suozzi, I'll begin with you because you just won election in your district in New York. Not mainly, but it was a central issue anyway of immigration. And for a Democrat to first step into the issue of immigration in a way that we haven't necessarily seen before, how do you view right now what's happening at the border, and what are some realistic solutions to solve the crisis there?
I mean, the bottom line is that the American people know that there's a chaos at the border. Henry lives it every day in his district. And we as Democrats have to talk to the people about what they care about. And this is what people care about. And realistic solutions, listen, I think the Senate bipartisan compromise was a realistic solution. Everybody supported it, from the Chamber of Commerce to the Wall Street Journal to the union president of the Border Patrol, who's a big Trumper. And I said I would support it, even though it doesn't have everything I want in it. But we need to have a compromise. People want this solved. And Henry approached me because he's been working on this issue for many, many years. And together with a group of 25 other Democrats, we're going to make this a priority for the Democratic Party to get a solution to the border crisis.
So, Congressman Cuellar, obviously this needs policy, this needs action, but there are also politics attached. And we know that for a long time, Republicans had the advantage per polling on the issue of immigration. The president and other Democrats trying to reverse that narrative, pointing out to the bipartisan bill that Republicans walked away from. So you tell us, do you think the president did a good job about this in the State of the Union? What more can he and you Democrats do about it?
Well, you know, first of all, most Democrats have ceded the narrative of the border to Republicans. And I think it's important that Democrats like Tom, myself, and other folks and the president start talking about border security. We as Democrats can talk about strong border security and still be respectful of immigrant rights, but we cannot cede the narrative to Republicans like we've done for so many years.
Yeah, go ahead, Congressman Suozzi.
Yeah, I think that, the president really leaned into this issue in his speech, and he's been doing it for a couple weeks now. And he's come out there and said, listen, I'm willing to compromise. I'm willing to move forward. I'm willing to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have done before because I want to get this done and I want to get Israel and Ukraine done. I'm willing to do this. And he says to Trump, he says, why won't you do it? I'll work with you. It's not about me. It's not about you, Trump. It's about the country. And the people of America are sick and tired of the finger pointing. They want solutions. And I think President Biden is leading into solutions.
And President Biden, like, as you say, said, join me, Donald Trump, join me in this when he was down at the border last week. So, Claire, the President of the United States has been dealt this hand, a favorable hand, by Republicans because there is that bipartisan legislation just sitting there, worked on by no less than Republican James Lankford of Oklahoma for months and months, only to be shut down in the House. So President Biden can say, I support this legislation. The Border Patrol Union supports this legislation. What's the holdup?
Yeah, it's really hard, I think, for this narrative in some ways, because that's why Trump really has to be Biden has to really be aggressive on this. It's not enough for him to just talk about it in the State of the Union. I think both these congressmen are correct that the president has to make this a central narrative to his campaign. And Congressman Suozzi, I know you don't want to point fingers, but don't you think it's important to point out? I remember I was there when President Trump was elected. He had a bigger majority in the House than the Republicans have now. He had a majority in the Senate. And there was no plan from Trump that ever got traction in Congress to do anything to solve the border crisis. Nothing. No legislation on the wall, no legislation on asylum. He had no solutions at all when they controlled every branch of government. Isn't that fair, and isn't it important to point that out?
That's absolutely fair. And listen, Mexico never paid for the wall. So, I mean, there was a lot of bluster and a lot of talk, and none of it happened. And the reality is that you mentioned Senator Lankford before. I mean, the bottom line is you couldn't ask for a more conservative, honest, ethical, intelligent Republican than James Lankford. And he said, listen, I'm really ready to get a job done here. I'm willing to make a compromise. And he teamed up with Chris Murray and with Kirsten Sinema. And the president said, I'll sign the bill. And as I said before, the Wall Street Journal, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Border Patrol Union president all said we endorse this bill. And Trump flies in and says, I don't want you to do this deal because it'll give a victory to Biden, and I want to run on the chaos. Now, it's not like anybody's disputing that. And when the American people hear that message more and more, they're going to say that's a lot of BS, and they're going to support the Democrats who are trying to get something done. And hopefully we'll get something done.
Congressman Cuellar, any hope from you on that end inside the House? Republicans got the bill they claimed they wanted, and now are rejecting it. Anything going to change here?
Well, look, and I think, we're all on the same point. That is, the Republicans said there's a problem. Then finally a bipartisan solution comes in from the Senate, and they reject it. They want to have an issue to talk about. And let me just point one more thing. I sit on Homeland Appropriations, and the last two appropriation cycles, we've added $2.4 billion to CBP so they can secure the border. And if you look at the voting records, except for two Republicans that are still in Congress right now, two Republicans that are still in Congress, every single Republican voted against $2.4 billion so we can give so we can provide more Border Patrol agents, more technology, more resources for the border. So we just can't talk about it. We have to roll up our sleeves, don't make it a talking point, put the resources and pass the Senate bipartisan bill.
Yeah, Border Patrol Union said this makes our agents' jobs easier and safer. Pass the bill. Co-chairs of the Democrats for Border Security Task Force, Congressman Henry Cuellar and Tom Suozzi, thanks both for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.